Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. On behalf of Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center, I'd like to welcome you all to Christopher Soto's LA book launch, Diaries of a Terrorist. Give it up, give it up. My name is Jimmy Vega, and I'm the Assistant Director of Beyond Baroque. I'd like to start off by acknowledging Beyond Baroque's presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tonga peoples. We acknowledge the wrong done to these peoples through settler colonialism, genocidal practices, and the violent disposition of their land. For those who don't know, Beyond Baroque is Los Angeles' oldest literary institution, located here in sunny Venice, California. Founded in 1968, first as an experimental literary magazine before reimagining itself and becoming the literary institution we know it to be. We're based out of the original Venice City Hall, and we support writers and help cultivate new writing through our extensive program of writing workshops, readings, and performances. We're currently offering a number of workshops online via Zoom, such as our free weekly Monday night fiction workshop, facilitated by Raquel Baker, and our historic Wednesday night poetry workshop, currently facilitated by Pam Ward. We also have a number of intensive paid in-person workshops slated for May, such as a poetry performance workshop with Mary Lou Newmark and a workshop titled Navigating Without Instruments with Tracy Kato Kitayama. Aside from our workshops, we do offer a number of readings, such as our online reading Poets Translate Poets, translating the avant-garde across borders, which will feature poet translators such as Anthony Seidman, Roberto Tejada, and Monica de la Torre, to name a few. And on May 21st, we will feature James Spooner's book launch, The High Desert, Black Punk Nowhere, which will include a mini zine fest and performances from LA punk bands, The Tissues and Dangers. For more information on all of this, please feel free to visit www.beyondbaroque.org. And finally, we offer a number of memberships to Beyond Baroque for as little as $30 for students. Purchasing a membership is an enormous help to us, especially during this pandemic, and it helps us to continue to offer free online and in-person programming as we have it today. But before I introduce our hosts for the evening, I'd like to give a special thanks to our wonderful staff, especially those with us tonight. So thank you to our executive director, Quentin Ring, our facilities manager and technical director, Dan McNay, our programs and communications fellow, Ivan Salinas, and our publicity and marketing intern, Megan Leahy. Thank you for all the hard work that y'all do on a continuous basis to make LA literature happen. Yeah, give it up, please. And a big thank you to Christopher Soto and his band of friends, Myriam Gurba, Joshua Jennifer Espinoza, Vanessa Angélica Villarreal, Jackie Wang, Tommy Pico, Stop LAPD Spying, and Dignity and Power Now for being here with us and sharing their insight and truth. We really appreciate it. Yeah, please, give it up, give it up. And finally, a big thank you to all of you who are present and filling up our Black Box Theater tonight. It's been a long time since I've seen this place this packed, so it's really exciting for me. And thank you for sharing physical, virtual space. We're streaming this live on YouTube tonight. And thank you for your continued support of everything that is LA literary and arts. So now, without further ado, oh, and before I get there, we do have Christopher's book for sale in the bookstore, and a number of our authors' books as well. Please support them. But now, without further ado, let's give it up to the host and the celebration of tonight's reading, Christopher Soto.
Thank you all. Thank you. Oh my God. Okay, I'm gonna say all my words about what this means for me personally and all the other things later. So let's just party and listen to everyone else first, right? All right, where am I? What am I doing? What's going on? All right, I want to. Yeah, I'll say the things later. I'll say the other things later. I want to when we started conceiving of the, I started conceiving of this tour. And what I wanted to do, because the book officially comes out May 3rd. So y'all, if you buy it today, it's like, it's on the DL, it's not out yet. But, but I was like, how do I want to bring, you know, this project into the world? And I was like, I just want to be with friends. Like that was really the basis of it. I was like, I just want to read with friends. So everyone who is here tonight, that's how I chose it. I was just like, these are just people that I fucking love. And in the audience here today is just people that I fucking love. So that's why we were like pouring the margarita and dancing to the cumbia, because this is just like a lot of fucking love in the room. So I'm really excited to introduce Myriam Gurba to the stage in a minute. Miriam's one of the oldest writers in my life, not in terms of age, but aquí está la vieja, Miriam la chingona Gurba. But we actually met, like, I think prior to my chapbook launch over a decade ago, and I always talk about it, but it just felt like I was like, who's here? And Miriam was like, try and ignore me, bitch. And it's such a voice for queer Latinas in Southern California, in LA, has carved so much space, and I'm just like perpetually following your footsteps. So thank you so much for the space you've carved for our whole fucking region, our whole fucking community. So it's huge. Thank you, Miriam.
Loma.
You have to tell the story about La Masquivona.
Oh my God. Okay, I'll tell the Mas Chingona story. So, a writer has a book coming out, and she hits me up and asks me for a blurb. And I said, okay. And so I send her the blurb, and then I get my copy of the book. And for a while, my Twitter handle was something to the effect of Miriam la más chingona Gurba. That's how I'm on the fucking book. They went, an intern went and snatched my Twitter bio, and now I'm la más chingona. My parents are really proud. So I'm sick of myself, and I want to honor Loma. So I'm going to be reading one of their poems, and it is titled "Orgies for the Elderly." Right? Okay. Y soy la más vieja. Okay. Swayed by the world's ugliest models, and finally enjoying the mediocrity of ourselves, we sold art for aristocracy, and some days we were so desperate for touch. Breastfeeding mothers made us jealous. Should be more ashamed. We know we looked our anus in the ugly, and it was looking back at us. How we shifted from desire to desire until there was no more wanting. Ghastly, scared of being stuck like a blowfish in plastic rings. Do you know how to scare an octopus? Ask about its future. Memory swam by, a silver shark we didn't want to touch. We took out the trash. We took out ourselves. We got arthritis while jerking him off. Our dentures dropped on his pubes, and we drooled like a little dog. We came with our walker and a mountain of Viagra, then sucked until the slow celestial release while zapatistas sang their hymnos in Chiapas. We got life advice from pregnant teens, only salt for sugar daddies. Thursdays, we knelt like a horse, braiding its hair in the cypress tree. Horses are unicorns that lost the war. Always next up in the poverty line, we watched our culture sell on the stock exchange, becoming recycled TV memories, each cloud dreamt of solid form. To forever love gay collage boys, to forever pray beneath the Pope's glitter thong. Thank you.
you. All right, then next person we're gonna have up is Vanessa Angélica Villarreal. Also, I feel like Latinos measure our relationships in terms of years. So I don't know any other way to measure it. Man, we've known each other for a long time. Also another fierce poet holding it down, and yeah. Amazing thinker, scholar, activist, someone who will punch you in the face if you need to be punched in the face, someone who will cry with you if you need to be cried with, someone who will laugh with you if you need to be laughed with. I think it just kind of embraces the full range of human emotions. So I'm excited to experience all of that with you in 1 hour. All right, welcome.
Hola. Buenas noches. I'm so honored to be here. I'm so honored to celebrate this beautiful book, this fierce book, this rebellious book. So I figured the best poems, I mean, we're both sad girls. That's how Loma and I became friends. We're both sad girls who hate the police and hate Border Patrol. So I'm gonna read my abolitionist poems for them to help bring in this beautiful book. The Axis of Dispossession, Figure 3. All you need to know about this is that it's on a XY axis, indicating economic value. There is nothing left to map but the ocean floor, nowhere to go when the prison follows you home. I address you, stranger kin. How do we imagine a world without prisons? Shift individual consequences to collective outcomes. Desire our untaming, and emerge from half-life, restored by a still living vein of original memory in the earth. Leom, center of reason, the world you made is starving, and survival makes criminals of us all. And have you been indicted yet for running the pyramid scheme of self-replicating colonial projects across the face of the globe, where the last deposits of resource can be tapped and traded? There's nowhere left to go, nothing left to extract, no more money to make. We do not have to go forward, because so long as we stay on course and progress on this timeline, history will keep happening to us. Yes, I'm just gonna read one more. It's called Root Future. Year 0, matrilineal equals repeat. Cycle, inherit, does not exist. 0 equals Carmen. Blooming ranch field, a throat packed with cotton, no choice but to marry her eldest off to the hoof-beaten storm. 0 equals Angélica. Escape the hoof-beaten storm, escape the garnet-eyed doctor, escape the stillborn country that pummels you to rags. 0 equals Silvia. English synonyms for future. Escape, amnesty, green card, possibility, dream, I promise, I will, I do, pregnant, labor, indebted, hospitalized, soul, provider, burden, loan, insufficient. 0 equals Vanessa. Witness this pattern now cycling into me again, lost eddies of time, lost again. I submerge my body in the river of unclaimed memory, swim again to its cervix and speak into the sea. I did everything I was supposed to do, and still an unbroken line of broken lines. 1 equals Joaquin. If someone is going to make it out of this dream alive, let it be you unbraiding from me. Let it be that this cord, its arcing line, when viewed from above, is an infinite field. And let the field open for you like a bell, its bend veined with a lace of new stars, and let each new star echo on earth as a blossom, bursting from the black, so that you, born from this blood dark grief, marbled with error, can still be perfect. Let every good beast carry you in its eye, open with wild knowing, and let every sagging telephone line carry my voice to you when I'm gone, when you're lonely or scared, and in a sleep soft drift, you'll think you hear me in the kitchen. And yes, there we are again, reflected in the bend of the steel spoon, the milk still spinning as we lick off the chocolate. And there we are again in the rust-burnt dusk, embers whirling off the mountainside, the last sight we'll have of an ocean. And yes, I'm sorry, I am so, so sorry. What else could I have done to stop the cell from splitting? Year one, set patrilineal equals new, AD, timeline, D, discovery. Conquest, 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 conquest. Start chronometer, start collective memory, start archive. Before the ship's arrival, there is no history. Any subject exhibiting any of the following conditions will be removed and denied re-entry into real time: undocumented, uncivilized, uncontrollable, unskilled, unwell, unaccompanied, unassimilated, uncolonized, unclean, unintelligible, unclaimed, unmarried, unattractive, unbecoming, unemployed, unauthorized, unprofitable, uninsured, underfoot, disabled, disappeared, diseased, disadvantaged, discarded, disassociated, disordered, dissenting, indebted, prehistoric, pre-agricultural, pre-capitalist, pre-discovery, pre-colonial, pre-Christian, primitivity, pre-literate, precarious, prey. Real future function. And after the coral bleaches to bone and the poles thaw and the clouds shatter a searing rain, the SpaceX colony will have already built an electromagnetic wall to border its orbit, and the field and the bent workers will still scoop tender chard under a burning sky for the empire. And even the mountains will kneel in witness and surrender to the sinking to greet once again that same ancient ocean. And when the last elephant falls, we will know the end of memory, and time will go white, and the future white, and the past white, wiped immaculate of fault, all time collapsed into a single line, all histories consumed by the official record and its impeccable family lines traced back through the whitened field, itself so straight, and us broken and broken trees to make way for the future, progressing ever forward in a line of suns. But any voyage that assumes a forward course will loop to its origin and cross itself. And so the compass rose will enclose the world into the shape of a gun sight. And when there are no new lands to map in blood, how pale will the horse of the last sunrise look underwater? Learn from this, little one. Time was never a line, but a field. And you are occurring alongside the past. And when I recognize abuelitos laugh in you or offer a bending lily to the dead, we are born and together again. And every minute I choose you, choose to fight and don't drive off the mountain. I encounter the infinite as the will to survive.
Congratulations, Loma!
Okay. The next person I've also known for 100 years. And Tommy and I, we met in one of my first poetry friends in New York City. So we were just talking shit and hating everything together in New York. And now we're talking shit and hating everything together in LA. But I remember when, I didn't tell you this, but we're both from Southern California. And I was like, can we go back and write? Can we be writers and poets? No one likes poets in LA. Like, can we do it? And I think Morgan was the first one to go, Morgan Parker. And I was like, what's she doing? And then Tommy went, and I was like, are we going back? And I was all like, fuck it, I'm coming, Tommy, I'm coming. And so those two moves really helped me come back and be around my friends and my family and the literary community out here. And I think poetry has always been the ugly like sister of all of literature. And I think that call it as it is. And I think that LA has always been like the ugly stepsister of literature, especially in relation to the publishing monster that is New York City. And so the fact that we can have spaces like this and community like this, and that I could be next to Tommy and Miriam and Vanessa and más. Holy shit, what a beautiful, okay, just fucking read the poems. Hello. Loma, you fucking did it, bitch. I carry my tote with me because I don't know you people. You know, initially I was gonna read some new stuff. Oh God, I forgot how fucking great it was to be in front of people. Ooh. Thank you for coming, man. Thank you for doing this, Loma, for putting this together, for putting us in a room together. Yeah, so I was gonna read some new stuff, and then I decided, you know, I'm gonna read from my book Nature Poem, which I wrote in a summer as a zine in Portland, and then I came back to New York with it, and I started giving it to my friends, Loma being one of them, and Loma said, bitch, I want more. It was like a 23-page zine at that point, and I hadn't thought of it as being more than that, but Loma was the person who got me thinking that this could be a book and not just a zine, not just a zine as in, I love zines, that's my shit. But that's the kind of creative ambition that our friendship has fostered and that I could never repay. I could just pay it forward. So thank you so much for that. That's as corny as I'm gonna get. All right, here we go. I'm just gonna hop around in this shit. The stars are dying. Like, always and far away, like what you see looking up is a death knell from light, right? Light years, but also close, like the sea stars on the Pacific coast, their little arms lesion and knot and pull away, the inside spill into the ocean. Massive deaths. When I try to sleep, I think about orange cliffs, bare of those orange stars. Knotted, glut. Waves are clear. Anemones and shit, sand crabs and shit, fleas. There are seagulls overhead. Ugh, I swore to myself I would never write a nature poem. The sand is fine. They say it's not Fukushima. I feel fine in the sense that, you know, I've been feeling very fit because I've been doing Tracy Anderson DVD workouts on YouTube. She says, reach, like you're being pulled apart. I can't not spill. Sometimes what you see is what you glut. And there are sometimes insides. I can't write a nature poem because it's fodder for the noble savage narrative. I would slap a tree across the face, I say to my audience. Let's say I'm at a pizza parlor. Let's say I'm having a slice at the bar. This man walks in to pick up his to-go order. Let's say his order isn't ready yet and he's chatty. Let's say I'm in Portland because people don't talk to me in NYC. Let's say he's like, meatballs are for the baby, pizzas for the little man, Caesar salads for the wife, and the beer, he points at the beer and then thumbs at himself. Beer's for me. He is one of those like cracked skin summer smiles. He keeps talking like I want to hear him. Like he's so comfortable, like everybody owes him attention. Look, I'm a weirdo Indian faggot. He puts his hands on the ribs of my chair, asks, do I want to go into the bathroom with him? Yeah. Let's say, at least not in the book, I didn't. Let's say it doesn't turn me on at all.
Let's say I literally hate men because men are animals. That's the kind of nature I'd write a poem about. Thank you. You don't have to do that. It's fine. I already know. Gay men are the worst people ever. Because if they don't want to fuck you, you're nothing to them. But they love dogs. When I say, that was a nonfiction essay in this. When I say I'm having a catfish bomb me, what I mean is leave me alone. What I mean is I love candy, but I'm an adult. I only let myself have candy at the movies. So I've been going to the movies a lot. Sometimes on dates, I buy the box of Gold Bears, but keep them scrunched in the cup holder on the armrest because I don't want him to think I'm the kind of adult who still hoovers candy, by which I mean, I don't want to be the kind of adult who still hoovers candy, but fuck, I still bought him like in good fun was going to offer him some, but he doesn't like sweets. And I thought too long about the prospect of a box of gummies breach, and we've been kind of cuddling, so the flick is halfway over. All those other snacky losers finish their soppy nachos and should have just wrapped in the movie like a normal person. And it's way past the crinkling hour, but hallelujah, he has to pee. So I quick rip the shit like a bird deck, eat a handful of gummy bears, shove the box back in my backpack before he gets back. NBD, crisis averted, Earth, a golden orbit of simplicity. Bitch, I did that on 2 breaths. So it means that I can suck dick underwater. I'm not gonna keep you too long.
Olympic.
If it was, gold medal. Okay, I can't write a nature poem because English, and that's some Stockholm shit, it makes me complicit in my tribe's erasure. Why should I give a fuck about poetry? It's a container for words like whilst and hither and tamp. It conducts something of a permanent and universal interest. Poems take something like an apple and turn it into the skin, the seeds, and the core. They talk about gravity, about Adam and Snow White, and the stem of knowledge. To me, Apple is an Indian drag queen who sings like a milkmaid and who dresses like a milkmaid and sings Half Breed by Cher. I would give a wedgie to a sacred mountain and gladly piss on the grass of the park of poetic form while no one's looking. I would stroll into the china shop of grammar and shout, "Let's trash this dump," and then gingerly slip out. And unrelated, once I called a cab to take me through the drive-thru at White Castle after the dining room closed. Ooh. 25, man. I sob at a Tim Lugos that Roy is reading me on the vegan diner on the formerly Italian side of Grand Street. Now, this is our medium, he says. My grandmother dreamed of Tin Pan Alley and wrote a song with the chorus, "Your kisses drop like atom bombs. Get in, loser. We're touring landscapes of the interior. In the mist of words, the plume, the matter, and the radiant energy." You can't be an Indian person in today's world and write a nature poem. I swore to myself I would never write a nature poem. Let's be clear, I hate nature. I hate its guts. I say to my audience. There's something smaller that I say to myself. I don't hate nature at all. Places have thoughts. Hills have backs that love being stroked by our eyes. The river gobbles down its tract as a metaphor, but also about its day. The bluffs purr when we put down blankets at the downturn of the sun and laugh at a couple on an I'll be okay Cupid date. And even more stellar, the jelly bean moon sugars at me. She flies and beams and I breathe. Fuck that. I recant. I slap myself. Let's say I live in NYC. Let's say I was the first person in my family to go to college. Let's say, I like watching New Girl on Hulu. This was back in the day. It's on Netflix now, but it used to be on Hulu. This is the difference. Some see objects in the earth where I see lungs. Sky Mother falls through a hole, lands on a turtle. Hole is my favorite band. It's hard to be anything but a pessimist when you feel the earth rotting away on so many homepages, and Katy Perry is an idiot, and cigarettes cost an arm and a leg. I'm on a porch. I'm petting kitties. And there's lavender in the air. The sun is over the hill. And my friend Roy knows the names of all the plants in his front yard. One of the kitties is named Witch Baby, and she likes to perch around your neck. The air is clear, and all across Instagram, peeps are posting pics of the sunset. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. The next person that we have up is Ahmed from Stop LAPD Spying. We organized together with UCLA Cops Off Campus a few years ago. A couple of us have him here. And Ahmed is just one of the most brilliant organizers in California. And I was like, can you please help us come and contextualize this evening and let folks know about some of the work that's going on, you know, in our communities too, because the book, a lot of the book talks about abolition and various interactions with policing in LA. And so I just think Ahmed is a person who I'd love to have in this space to help us think about these issues as well. So thank you, Ahmed.
Damn, it's nice to be not in a Zoom wonderland anymore, at least not tonight. था जिंदगी में मर्ग का खटका लगा हुआ, उड़ने से पेशतर भी मेरा रंग जर्द था. This is a little couplet from Mirza Asadullah Khan Ghalib, who was a poet in India back in the 18th century. And the literal meaning is, even before I took my flight, I was turning pale with fear. But in the broader context, it's about the audacity to act, the audacity to think, and the audacity to envision. So when I was reading Chris's book, Diaries of a Terrorist, well, one, I have my own diaries of a terrorist. Hamid Hussain Khan, born in Pakistan, sand nigger, camel jockey, towel head, terrorist. That's what the diaries contain as we move through life. But thank you, Chris, because this is a gift for all of us. Diaries of a Terrorist exemplifies and embodies the audacity of thinking about abolition, of practicing abolition, of thinking of a world not just without police, but the policing of our bodies, the policing of ourselves, the policing of our agency, how we are trained to think, how we are trained to act, and how we are trained to function. Diaries of a Terrorist. It's, again, as I was reading through that as well, a lot of thoughts conjured up. And what it constantly reminded me that how abolition is a multi-generational journey. It's not a delete button. It's not just going to happen tomorrow. It'll be great. Let's burn it down. Let's dismantle this motherfucker. That's what we are here to do. But Diaries of a Terrorist really gives us a pathway. It gives us a framework. One of our work at Stop LAPD Spying Coalition is to really expose academic complicity. Academic complicity, nonprofit complicity, that how these systems work, how these systems have been built to comply and to submit. And it's extremely refreshing to have something from people like Chris who are giving us that roadmap. My own personal journey through my own Diaries of Terrorists has been an interesting one. Being on the front lines, having visits by the FBI, sitting in an airplane, which was really ironic, and this was in July 2002, flying to New York for a human rights conference. And the airplane pushes back, we're on the tarmac, heading for takeoff, and the airplane stops. And it's an odd feeling when you have 200 people just turn around and start looking at you. And then you're being questioned, and then you're being asked. Because what you learn as an immigrant coming to the United States is that white supremacy thrives on bloodletting. It thrives on bloodletting. And it's not just the physical bloodletting, it's the emotional bloodletting. It's the emotional trauma that intentionally leaves in its wake as well and in its trail. And that's a call to action that Diaries of a Terrorist gives us. And I'm going to just close off by sharing another couplet that Qatlgaho se chunke hamare alam aur niklenge ushaq ke khafile. From these killing fields shall rise the lovers of freedom, picking up the banners from the fallen ones. And Diaries of a Terrorist is a banner that we should all claim. Thank you.
The next person that I want to welcome up is also an amazing organizer and abolitionist from LA, and we met in New York about a decade ago. And little baby queer abolitionist. And in New York City, we've been hating cops together for about a decade. And so much of Yvette's thinking and framework has infused movement spaces from New York to LA, and their work is so vital to our movement and our community. So thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Buenas tardes. Yeah, I met Loma about a decade ago, and we met at the club. I used to throw these little queer, BIPOC, global-based parties called Azúcar, and they were a watering hole for our communities. It's how we connected with each other. That's how I met a lot of my LA queer folks in New York. They come to Azúcar, and we would dance, we would be in community with each other, and we would spend the night, like Loma and I, talking about abolition. And it was where I found my club kid community with conscience, It's where it's true, where we not only like to play hard, but we hit the streets hard as well for our communities. So it's such an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to be here to celebrate your work, to see you from those baby queers that we were in New York, just kind of stumbling around, to see you flourish like back in our hometown, right? So it's such an honor and a privilege. So I'm the director of policy and advocacy at Dignity and Power Now. We're a grassroots Los Angeles-based organization that is led by and works for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer, trans, GNC folks, formerly incarcerated folks, the families of formerly incarcerated folks, and those that have been harmed by law enforcement on the street. And we do this not just through policy and advocacy and grassroots organizing, but also by providing health and wellness support to our community members. When someone is killed by law enforcement, we are able to dispatch our healers to that family to support them through that process. And I share all of this because that is the practice of abolition in real time. Abolition is not a concept. It's not this theory. Abolition is a practice. And not only is it a practice, it's a practice that's happening right now. When you choose not to call the cops on your neighbors, when you see a mental health crisis and you step up and support that person, when you're able to support folks outside of the system, which by and large for Black, Indigenous, people of color, for immigrant communities, for our trans communities, we have been doing that already. From Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera with STAR doing sex work solidarity work. We are creating our own futures in our own communities already. We do not have to wait for abolition. Abolition is happening right now and we can all participate. But I really want to ground ourselves in where we are in space. We are at the epicenter. We are at the epicenter of state violence and mass incarceration. Los Angeles is the largest jail system on the planet. Take a moment to sit with that. We have more incarcerated people in Los Angeles than anywhere else in the nation. And living in New York, having lived in the Bay, living in Los Angeles, we really purport ourselves to be super progressive, right? Like we are the left flank of the country. We have progressive values. We have a progressive electoral politics here. But when we actually look at the data, when we actually look at what's happening in our communities, there is a dissonance there. We are not as progressive as we try to make ourselves out to be. And the proof is in the Black and brown and trans and GNC bodies that are currently being caged inside of Men's Central Jail, inside of Twin Towers. They're being separated from their families. They're being tortured and they're being killed. Last year alone, over 50 people died inside of the LA County jail system, and not one cop has been held accountable. Since the year 2000, over 900 people have been killed by law enforcement, mostly Black and brown, and not a single cop has been held accountable. We are at the epicenter. LA County is not only home to the largest jail system, we have the largest police and the largest sheriff departments in the whole country. We have the largest law enforcement budgets, and we have the deadliest law enforcement systems in the country. This is not something to be proud of. And every time that a dollar is spent on law enforcement and on incarceration, we are complicit in that. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what are we doing to actually disrupt that? And we do this through art. We do it through poetry. We do it by taking to the streets. We do it through the ballot box. We do that by supporting our neighbors outside of the system. You know, Myriam Gurba teaches us that cages confine people, not the conditions that facilitate their harms or the mentalities that perpetuate violence. So when we're thinking about how do we disrupt these systems, we need to think of how are we disrupting those systems that are replicated in our own lives. How do we disrupt disposability? Abolition teaches us that no one is disposable, that our value and our worth is not based on the worst thing that we've done, that there are paths for redemption. And the abolitionist movement is being led by those at the intersection of state and interpersonal violence. We often think of the perpetrators of violence and the victims. That's the binary that's been sold to us. But in fact, those that are being harmed by state violence through police violence and incarceration are often the same folks that are survivors of interpersonal and intercommunal violence. We cannot allow binaries to force us to ignore the truth that survivors are actually at the helm of this movement. Survivors are the ones informing abolitionist movements. Survivors are the ones being caged for surviving. Our young people have been targeted from the very beginning in our Black, brown, and immigrant communities and our trans communities. And so every time that we're spending another dollar on these systems, we are preparing a jail cell for them. We are preparing a grave for them. You know, Ted Conover's book, New Jack, he illustrates the idea of budgets as imagined futures made real, and the ways that the alternative futures reflect different ideas about who we are. Conover is talking to a person in prison he calls Larson, who is locked up in Sing Sing, one of New York's oldest and most deadly prisons, much like Men's Central Jail here in Los Angeles. There has been news that the governor of New York is going to spend money building new clean prisons. And Conover is surprised that Larson opposes that spending. Larson explains, anyone planning a prison they're not going to build for 10 or 15 years is planning for a child. Planning prison for somebody who's a child right now. You see, they've already given up on that child. They already expect that child to fail. Now, why? If you could keep that from happening, if you could send that child to a good school and help his family stay together, if you could do that, why are you spending that money to put him in jail? Every dollar, every action that we're taking right now is setting the stage for our young people moving forward. We are actively creating the future that we want to see right now. So when it's important to think about, what are we doing right now? What can we do right now to make the future a reality for our young people, for our loved ones, for our elders? This is the call that we have. And that may look like creative work, that may look like policy work, that may look like a lot of things for each and every one of us, but we are all valuable. No one is disposable, and we all have a stake in our liberation. Thank you very much.
Well, I think we should keep going on the abolitionist like think tank train. Next up is Jackie Wang, who does everything. If you see a harp in my book, it's Jackie. I'm thinking about Jackie. Was also one of the first poets, and everyone here, fuck it, same story. I've known Jackie a million years. But we met in a queer commune in the woods of Tennessee before I went to New York, and then had followed each other to New York, and now we're together in California. But Jackie's thinking is so embedded in my work and in national thoughts around abolition. Honored to have you with us, Jackie.
So it's such an honor to be here tonight. And when Loma was talking about poetry being the ugly sister of the literary world, I was like, oh, we met at like the ugly sister caucus at the queer commune. Like poet caucus. And it's like, it's so funny because we've known each other for so long, and we've been like abolitionist poets for a really long time. Before was like whatever was in the zeitgeist. But yeah, so I'm just so honored to be here tonight. I'm gonna read a little bit from the prison abolitionist imagination from my book Carceral Capitalism. And I think something that I've been thinking about, and when I was working on carceral capitalism, I just couldn't get over the fact that we put people in cages. And I just still, like, every day, it's unbelievable to me. So recently I visited my older brother who's incarcerated in Florida, and he was in CM, in close management in Florida. And he was telling me about the shit that was happening inside prison. And he said that there were multiple murders while he was in lockdown, and he had to clean up the body of a dead person and vomited while doing this, because this is what they make people do in prison. So it's just something that I can't believe, like, this is the world that we live in. So I'm going to read a few excerpts from the prison abolitionist imagination. The late Mark Fisher once famously said that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. The same could be said about prisons. It's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine a world without prisons. And yet the modern prison as it currently exists in the US is a fairly recent invention. Florida, which now has one of the largest prison systems in the US, had no physical penitentiaries at the end of the Civil War and had to create its penal system from scratch. Yet at this historical juncture, prisons have become thoroughly naturalized. Imagining and working towards a world without prisons, which is the project of prison abolition, would not only require us to fundamentally rethink the role of the state in society, but it would also require us to work towards the total transformation of all social relations. A project as lofty as this is easy to dismiss as unrealistic, utopian, impractical, naive, an unrealizable dream. But what if instead of reacting to these charges with counter arguments that persuasively demonstrate that the abolitionist position is the only sensible position, we instead strategically use these charges as a point of departure to show how the prison itself is a problem for thought that can only be unthought using a mode of thinking that does not capitulate to the realism of the present? Can the re-enchantment of the world be an instrument that we use to shatter the realism of the prison? So there's a letter that the revolutionary Rosa Luxemburg wrote from prison that I also want to read parts of, that's in the book. This is titled Entombed Flowers. In 1917, the revolutionary Rosa Luxemburg wrote to her comrade Sophie Leibniz from prison, quote, "Yesterday, I lay awake for a long time. I dreamed to myself about various things in the dark. How odd it is that I'm constantly in a joyful state of exaltation without any particular reason. I lie there quietly, alone, wrapped in these many layered black veils of darkness, boredom, lack of freedom, and winter. And at the same time, my heart is racing with an incomprehensible, unfamiliar inner joy, as though I were walking across a flowering meadow in radiant sunshine. And all the while, I'm searching within myself for some reason for this joy. I find nothing and must smile to myself again and laugh at myself. I believe that the secret is nothing other than life itself. And in the crunching of the damp sand beneath the slow, heavy steps of the centuries, a beautiful small song of life is being sung, if only one knows how to listen properly. At such moments, I think of you, and I would like so much to pass on this magical key to you, so that always and in all situations, you would be aware of the beautiful and the joyful, so that you too would live in a joyful euphoria, as though you were walking across a multicolored meadow. In the dark of the night, you traveled to a colorful meadow, and with your powerful imagination wove that meadow into a cloak of stars that you imparted to your comrade Sophie to wear as a shield against everything terrible. What bloomed in your mind that night as you lay quietly listening to the boots of the centuries crunch the sand? You were sharpening your perceptive faculties so you could tune into the exalted frequency. You were sensitized by your cell, by the boredom weighing you down until the pressure of the darkness gave way to an understanding of the deepest mysteries of what it means to be alive, of the connection between desire and politics. I think of your fate, of George Jackson's fate, of Fred Hampton's fate. The state must know when the universe gives birth to a true revolutionary. It must see in them a light it must extinguish, lest their spark find and set alight the divine spark in us all, which would spread into the world as we know it has been upended. Alone in your cell, your body became pure nerve. You were perceiving everything. It made you giddy, the inner joy you felt against the bleak backdrop of the prison. I imagined how you passed your time there, studying political economy and botany, writing letters to your comrades, assembling your herbaria, preparing for the revolution, getting lost in the flowers of your imagination. Thank you.
All right, we only have 2 poets left, Jen and me, and then we're gonna party. Are we allowed to have orgies here? A lot of cute people. Y'all should look at the policy. Just kidding. Okay, so Jen is another dear friend, poet, sweetheart. We're teaching together right now at Occidental. No comment. And I'm just really excited. Oh, it's public now for your my book, for your book coming out from Alice James. So congrats to Jen, and welcome to the stage.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just so honored to be reading with all of these amazing people. Thank you all so much for sharing everything that you shared. And Loma, I'm just so proud of you for the amazing accomplishment that is Diaries of a Terrorist. I'm just, being able to have spent these years alongside you, watching this thing come into development and watching you work through it and watching it come into fruition has just been such a beautiful experience. And I just so proud of you. I'm going to be reading some poems from my 3rd collection, I Don't Want to Be Understood, forthcoming from Alice James Books in 2024. This first poem is called Airport Ritual. It is about the lovely experience of being pulled aside by TSA as a trans woman. Okay, here we go. An anomaly is spotted. A woman is taken aside. I'm going to have to touch you now, an agent says. I'm going to use the front of my hands on most of you and the back of my hands on your private parts. Is there anything you need to let me know before I proceed? I'm trans, the woman leads him to whisper, unsure if she means this as a warning or an apology. That's okay, the agent says as she grabs the woman's shoes. Would you like to take this elsewhere? Before the woman can answer, the thing in her pants that set the sensors off suddenly expands, tearing through her clothes and revealing an amorphous blob of cosmic energy. It is purplish and void-colored at the same time. There is an impossible shimmer to it. It grows outward, enveloping the agent, the body scanning machine, and the white dads in red baseball hats gawking at her predicament. Then the whole terminal, then the entire airport. The military plans a strike in response. Some trans guy who fought for the right to kill people on behalf of an empire that hates him has chosen to operate the drone. Better optics, someone thought. When hit, the woman grows hundreds of times her size. The city of Irvine is pretty much toast. No big loss. Fox News is floating the idea of forcing trans people into detention facilities until we're sure they don't all pose the threat of having expanding cosmic blobs for genitalia. It's polling well. Meanwhile, the woman at the center of the plasma, or whatever the fuck it is, just wants someone to say one thing to her that doesn't feel like kite string wrapped around an open wound and warm, strong wind, but it doesn't happen. So she sings something to herself, a song she heard in a grocery store once. Michelle Branch, frozen food aisle, instant tears. She remembers her life, floats up into a cloud, gets carried away. No one can track her. She is dispersed, rained down upon the dirt and patchy grass where her old house used to be. Flowers bloom. People pluck them and give them to people they love. Everything is normal. Every day. You'll feel fear as a blue sky, a green light, a line of people swaying in place like grass. One is always emerging into something, out of something else. You've traveled by light to get here. Each panic attack had its own frequency. You memorized the language and it barely touches you now. All you've lost is blood, your old home, bits of who you used to be embedded in stucco. Every day was ordinary. You'd wake up and pretend to be a boy. You'd go to sleep and dream of being a woman. Eventually, you never regained consciousness. This wasn't a decision. It's just what happens when you realize how far away stars are, how old the universe is, how a life is an open thing leaking out into the air around it. You are afraid of being seen. You are afraid of being named. Even as you flow from street to street wrapped in dead roses, you'll remember who lives here. You can't wait to be able to say no to all of them. Makeup ritual. This is not another feminist poem about the tyranny of Western standards of beauty. Or maybe it is. I don't know. As a trans woman, I'm still not sure what I'm allowed to contribute to the topic. According to some, I exist only to reinforce gendered violence, my body a blade sliding up and down the legs of real women, forcing its way under their arms and carving the language of misogyny into every surface. Wow, who knew I had so much power? I don't even leave the house unless I've had time to build a world on my face and make myself palatable for public consumption. Is it so wrong to be afraid when I've seen what can happen, when I've had it happen to me? In my life, there is nothing more beautiful than dissociating in front of a mirror and drawing perfect lines across the flesh, wrinkle to wrinkle, eyes rolling up into themselves, plastic pulling lashes into little curls. I live to cover my shadow with blood, to cake my entire image. For me, this means something like safety, like hits of oxygen from a falling plane. The first time I saw my face made up, I couldn't help but cry it all off. What will I call myself now, I wondered. It helps to have a name, even though a name is a room you can never leave. The heat death of the universe. On an ordinary night, I read comments full of people saying trans women deserve to be murdered for existing. And then I brush my teeth and go to bed like it's nothing. I sit there and stare at the ceiling until my eyes adjust enough to see the tiny cracks in it. Good shit, I think to myself, great stuff. I have 500 names and all of them are bad. Together, they sound like baseball bats against bone, like wings beating frantically in an airless space, like God asking herself if she really exists. It is surreal to imagine how I will keep living like this, how I probably won't drink myself to death, how my skin will stretch and fold in on itself like time and space and memory and dreams, how I would stay alive forever and suffer the fate of the sun and the heat death of the universe just to spite everyone. As he killed me, I imagined him. As he killed me, I imagined him floating through the years of his life, pantomiming violence, eating flowers bound in fleshy vines, a forest unto himself. I couldn't help but feel each moment as my own, voiceless fists swinging at invisible walls, housing the truth of a manhood composed by exclusion, a saddening love emptied and unfeeling, drawn helplessly to its roots, wondering what in this future can be spared. He says light beams and God and spirit-tongued mystery into my darkness, but the darkness fights back, thrusts itself into every space of empathy, my softly beating curse. Once I cried for the smell of grass, its blood filling the air, my knees stained green with the world. Now I drift around, listen to the pain of things, don't allow my ghost to hurt anyone. Birthday suits. I turned 24 and Dad decided to take another stab at making a man out of me. On his command, I drove us out to Hollywood where you could get 3 sets of suits for $100. What a steal, he exclaimed, as though his enthusiasm would fertilize something that never existed within me. Regardless, I followed him into the outlet and I allowed him to wrap the cheap, heavy thread around my tired shoulders, to salt the wound of my body with his idea of truth. I let it happen, but I did not forget what I was beneath the cover of the flesh. 5 million faggy mountains slicing through fields full of dreamed up tongues and unnameable bluish grasses, each blade the length of a universe stretching inward towards a singular point of life-sustaining unlogic. Dressing myself behind the heavy polyester curtain, I listened as Dad held the suit guy hostage with the oft-told tale of the night he encountered real-life biblical demons. How at first he felt their presence tightening inside his chest and then witnessed them crawling up and down his walls, and how he prayed and cursed them in the name of the Lord until they dissolved like sugar into the dark. And he never said this, but I knew he was convinced that they came for me next, and colored my nails and stretched out my hair and adorned me with flowers and forced my inside places to whisper woman, 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 late each night at the moment just before sleep. And I knew he knew who I was becoming, and I understood what the suits were for. So I tossed them in the back of my trunk where they sat waiting for years. And the day I sold that car off, those suits were still in there. Coming out. I wrote a letter. I started drinking and I didn't stop drinking until 1 week ago. I remembered all the fires that used to threaten our house, how we'd have to pack up and leave and hope we'd be returning to something other than ash, how you'd pray, how I'd tell myself God would do whatever she wanted and we just have to deal. I don't think God would like what you've done with her. She was a dream at the beginning of time who could have never imagined all this blood, all these names for things, all these bodies trying to forget themselves. I told you how I wanted to die before this happened. This earth was always too small for the sound I make. You said there were answers in prayer, and you were right. When I inhale, I am praying. When I get dressed, I am praying. When I climb the mountain and let the wind fuck me up, I am praying. When I call myself a woman, I am praying. When I cut loose every inch of hell that was woven through my body, I am praying. It doesn't matter if I'm understood. You'll still try to destroy me in your own way. Maybe with your hands, maybe with your silence, maybe with your tacit approval of this machine. Here us women are, crackling like sparklers above a lawn, scraping diamonds from asphalt, giving praise to the mountains before us, our love and our grace and our tenderness enough to change the shape of the universe. You say goddess or you say dead girl. We live in the margins but don't get a taste of the joy of being there. Not without loss. Not without broken bones and bandaged flesh. Our condition is nameless, and we know this, so we drift and deflate and let the wind have us. But we don't stop living, even when we sense our impending ghost, even when we finger the dirt and think home. Our life was always a thing of magic, and magic is what lives outside of law. One day we will be allowed to exist, and you will never see us again. Okay, I'm gonna read a couple of love poems. This is called Love Poem. I got up today and wrote 3 poems for you while you spoke on the phone to an old friend. I folded my laundry and listened to you laughing through the wall. I feel like a child in a good way. I want to make you oatmeal and coffee in the morning and listen to you talk about flowers and death and West Virginia. You tell me your story every day. I fall in love with you every night. You teach me to string together all things. That is what poetry is. You teach me poetry. Only with you and in pure solitude do I encounter the sacred. I don't say anything, I tremble. You're with me in my dreams, and even when I forget them upon waking, a sureness remains, and I am with you gratefully, no longer waiting for any words to come. Okay, this is the last poem I'm gonna read, and it's called My Love for You. I didn't know where it would take me. I focused on it for just a second and felt carried like a river whose water has gone still inside the carrying. I half slept through a shifting of earth skin and prayed to wake up to an open ocean, to abandon movement finally for wholeness. I don't know where we will go. The dream won't tell me, you won't tell me, nothing will tell me. I am in love with you and am tired of pretending the path can be calculated. I am ready to rush. Thank you all so much.
How we doing, folks? Good? All right, well, it is my honor to introduce Christopher Soto, a poet based on Tavangar, Los Angeles, California. Currently works at UCLA's Ethnic Studies Research Centers, which I think is not the case, but and teaches at UCLA's Honors College. Soto has organized with the Cops of Off-Campus movement. He co-founded the Undocu Poets campaign and Writers for Migrant Justice. He's been awarded fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the June Jordan Teaching Corps at Columbia University, Canto Mundo, and others. He received his MFA in poetry from NYU. Please welcome Christopher Soto.
Okay, now I think I say all the things, yeah? Thanks to Jimmy, Beyond Baroque. Thanks to all of my friends. Thanks to all the abolitionists. Thanks to you all for being here. I literally have homie from Guatemala in the corner. I have Jackie's a homie I met in Tennessee, and other homies from New York. Like there's my best friend since 4th grade, Maestra, who kept me alive in undergrad because that school was shit. Literally, like all of it was shit except for Maestra. Like I'm a creative writing person and I dropped my major. I was just like, this is a minor now, we're getting out of here. And just so my primo, I got a tío here, like there's just thank you. I've only cried 5 times this morning. And it was cycles. I think it was just, I forget what it was. Oh, it was the last episode of Veneno. I don't know if you all seen that. Oh man, that fucked me up. Like I wasn't, but it's related. So, you start crying a little about one thing and then the movie progresses and then you're crying from another place. You're like sad crying, happy crying, and you run out of tears and you're like, I'm done. They give you like a 5-minute break and then all of a sudden something else happens. You're like, that was my morning. There's just so much, like Jackie said, it took, it felt like we were the only little abolitionist poets 10 years ago debating people of whether poetry could be political or not, fighting for our space to have publication in the tiniest little thing, and more. And and the landscape has changed. And I think in a way, because of that, I look at some of these works and I'm like outdated. But for me, it feels like a time capsule of the abolitionist movement in the last 10 years. And if I were to write it now, obviously there's things I would change. So given that it does function as a bit of a time capsule, I say, what can this book do within the context of where we're at now? And I think one of the things, because in the last I think it was Ruth Wilson Gilmore who got profiled by New York Times in 2016 or 17. And that was the first time that I saw abolition spoken about in a mainstream periodical without there being a ha-ha after it. It was actually talked about and I was like, oh shit, like this is weird. And then in the uprisings in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder by Minneapolis police, you saw abolition spoken about in CNN and major places, and they're kind of trying to learn to grapple with language and how to discuss this issue. And I remember when the Minneapolis City Council said that they were going to abolish the police, I called Jackie. I was still crying. And I was like, is this it? Did we get here? And because I had always thought that we were going to die, like without abolition being anywhere within our horizon, and seeing where the movement has gone in the last 10 years, that I can even stand in this room and have people have a basic lexicon around what that means to them or their communities. It feels fast and it feels powerful. And I think that's what this morning, I really feel like we do have a lot of people power, and our little poems and our little essays and all the shit that we do, we're really changing the way that people perceive of safety, of healing, of community, of so many various things. So it's really powerful to again be, so anyways, how do we advance the conversation from now? One of the places that I think we're still struggling a bit is this, how to communicate about violence, right? So I think a lot of people think about things such as like houselessness or mental health issues, and we're like, the police should not respond to these issues, obviously. But then we go to things such as, quote, violent crime, and we have a hard time being like, shit, what do we do? You know, if we don't have prisons or if we don't have police. And I think this book it's, you know, a survivor's book for abolition. And the hard violence is at the heart of this, looking and thinking through alternatives to violence that aren't contingent on punitive or surveillance-based systems on cages is at the heart of this book. So if that's the lens, if you see violence, all of this is. So what can we do as writers, as poets? One of the things we do is we work with language. So why do we say arrest and why do we not say kidnapping when that happens? People leave onto the streets, they think they're gonna go home. A lot of the times they get kidnapped from their social, they get kidnapped from their economic communities. Name the violence as it's happening. State violence doesn't always get legible as violence. Why do we say incarceration? Why do we not talk about human caging? Dr. Kelly Lido Hernandez talks about human caging within the history of Los Angeles. The first instance here on this land in Tovangar was in the 1700s, I believe 1770s, when Indigenous women were held captive overnight, women and girls over the age of 8, and the missionaries to colonize, to coerce them into the priest and the missionaries' perspectives. That book speaks about abolition or speaks about policing as an eliminatory practice. And so I think that's what we can do here is, yes, name the histories of carceral violence, name the language human caging, name the language kidnapping that makes state violence legible as violence, so that we could understand that, like Yvette said, there's this false dichotomy of like perpetrators of violent crime and survivors of violent crime, and the prison being the home of the people who aren't survivors. And I think what we need to do now is be like, abolition tomorrow is reform. We need abolition today, because if we're actually interested in reducing violence or eliminating violence in our community, we should not have 1.9 million people in this country who are encaged. That is violence. If we're interested in reducing or eliminating violence, abolition today. Okay, let's read. So, this poem, I think the word violence in and of itself is very nebulous. I think the writer is Michael Warner at Yale's American Studies or English department, I forget. He says, like, to name something as violence is to immediately stand outside of it. And so that word is so nebulous. So I was thinking in this poem, is called Then a Hammer Realized Its Life Purpose. I wanted to talk about 3 ways that my body has been touched and how all of those have differing emotional relationships. So domestic violence, kink, and then boxing. How can I be hit? And each one of those elicit a different response. Yes, our body, also I'm just gonna read an excerpt because it's super fucking long poem. Yes, our body sometimes does crave it. The soft blue touch of a bruise beneath the sweater. This is a story of hands on us, domestic violence to kink to boxing. We were a front, a firing squad. We were a fire, a flame extinguished. We were flamboyant. Our buoyancy burst a boy ago. We began boxing with other survivors to let go of anger, as if anger were a little red balloon zigzagging into the stratosphere. Maybe anger is what happens when love feels threatened, and we loved ourselves so much we used to punch our ribs before sleep, trying to make our skin tougher so we couldn't feel father punching us. Jab, lead hook, cross, duck, jab. On that first boxing class, our arms flurried against the bag. The instructor said, imagine your enemy. and tears were track runners down our face. A little lake fell to the ground. We dove in. An encyclopedia of motherfuckers appeared on the bag, and we beat them all. Lead hook, back uppercut, slip, cross. We walked as if nobody could fuck with us. We boxed because therapy and writing and forgetting wasn't enough. Boxing because sometimes it feels like no is just the sound that one makes to warn of danger. Like a train whistling or a flashing red light, no couldn't stop the wreckage. As much as we wish it would. No, no, no. Our fists were swinging against the bag as if that could have stopped him. Lead hook, back hook, duck, keep your guard up. We imagined our enemies' feet fast across the floor, legs flash from one position to the next. Surprised by the graceful flow in a boxer's body, before yanking off drenched gloves, untying the wraps to see blue-red between our webs, the peeled knuckles, we asked our friends what enemy he was punching. He said he was fighting bigotry and hate. He was fighting concepts and not people. In the locker room, he waited for us to undress before showing his nipples. We contemplated Mexican brutalism and Luis Barragon in a luxury gym because that had become our life. We walked out that door and pretended to box on the street. We laughed and jabbed at one another, taught one another about form, not the guzzle or sonnet or triolet. He said, lift your elbow. You don't want the punch to land on the last two knuckles. For a moment, we smelt big. For a moment, we smelt too big to attack. We walked near the East River in Brooklyn, looking at downtown Manhattan. We asked consent before male-gazing at the stars. We looked at the One World Trade Center and remembered what was there in our youth. Twin Towers. We remember visiting the towers before they fell or were pushed over. Gray hot dog water in the cart caddy corner. We thought, if America, the biggest bully, wasn't immune to attack, then how could we ever think we were safe? Maybe in the aftermath, we have more in common with America than we want to admit. Maybe a boundary becomes a border when nobody's allowed to cross. Maybe we built walls so giant to keep everyone out. Maybe our mouth was a weapon we were willing to launch too readily. And mostly we were afraid of the people we'd never met, which is to say, we see sunflowers in the eyes of a friend, sunflowers outside the kitchen sink, sinking into another thought during lunch break. We broke it down while drying dishes to Nina Simone, moaned over her interviews, believed every word she said when she said, freedom means to live with no fear. Thank you. So poems. I don't believe in craft. I really don't. Craft is racist and arbitrary. I wasn't planning on having that conversation, but 2-second tangent, I'm Aquarius. So I was writing this book review and they asked me to talk about craft, but I just put kind of in response, I was all like, literary craft and poetry in particular isn't only responsive to the phonetics of language, but also to the imperatives of capitalism, meaning like, you know, you in the United States particularly, you have agents, you have touring, you have book publishers, you have book reviews, you have all of this infrastructure that could give you a little bit of money if you're legible to them. Abolition was illegible for a long time, but now, etc. And so, and so, and so the poetry or the literature that we produce is not just like sonic and linguistic joy, but we're also responding to the pressures of the nation state. And as you look at the literatures in various different parts of the world, you see the poetry changing phonetically, also politically, structurally. So what does that mean is in places like Italy, romantic language, you have the villanelle, you're responding to like the phonetics of that language. What does that mean in somewhere like Korea, for example, where gendered is poetry, you have certain people who are assigned to write particular forms of poems. That's historically not right now. And so I always have a hard time with craft or like thinking it's actually something that's important. But this book, and Jackie and I, again, we're just talking about it, uses the we pronoun throughout the book. And for me is a bit of a push against American isolationism so that I could write amongst the collective. So I'm saying, no, like in an abolitionist movement, it's not just me that policing is impacting. It's not the one person who was arrested, the one person who's incarcerated, the one person who survives. Policing is something that's impacted the collective. And it's not just me who has written the book. It's, you know, my primos, my everyone in here has words and thoughts and lives in this book, and we have written it together. And the least important artifact of the book is the narrator or the speaker in this moment. Like if I could just like go over there and then God was just like, I would do that, because it doesn't, because this does not matter in the scheme and the relation of the we. The we is assumed to be abolitionists and survivors within the capitalist marketing that I've done for this book, but that is also up for debate. Drag me, it happens. So since we're all closed out with this poem, I wasn't planning on reading it. I'll do again another excerpt. It tends to be a bit more phonetic, so I just want to have fun with language. So don't worry too much if you don't understand it, neither do I. It's called Two Lovers in Perfect Synchronicity. It was written for a queer Latino artist, Felix Gonzalez Torres, after he lost his partner to AIDS in 1991 in Los Angeles, the year I was born. So I was thinking of the connection between myself and other queer Latino artists in communities in Los Angeles, and how I wish I could, you know, meet Ross and Felix. I'll start here. All right. Oh, Los Angeles. Let's try it. We'll try it again. Oh, Los Angeles. Cancel the orgy. All right, maybe it's my fault. It's me. I never look at myself. I know it's a problem. I'm working. All right. Oh, Los Angeles. Oh, Hollywood Hills, oh, Placita Olivera, San Pedro, Long Beach, oh, Taqueria and Westminster, oh, the 405 freeway, left arm, sunburnt, windows down. We were on the beach chairs, beach coolers, beach bums, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, witch chips in the sand, Pringles or Ruffles, vodka, watermelon, suntan lotion, and we laughed with towels over our head. Police said, "Are you drunk? Are you high?" And we replied, "No, we're Salvadorian." Police harassed us so much. We stopped driving, we stopped biking, we moved to a different city. Police asked drivers' license, our red rubbed eyes, our brown skin, our brown. We didn't jog the stop sign. We didn't pass the speed limit. Our music wasn't too loud. No queremos hablar contigo, jodón. And it's amongst these conditions we love, we try to Homeboy is beautiful. Felix and Ross, Hugo and us. That's real. On the down low, low riders and smog, homie, ho. He's hugging the stomach of our pillow, con boca cerrada no entran moscas, and tumbleweeds and cacti, and every day at the museum, visitors walk to the installation, a pile of candies individually wrapped. The visitors were looking for Ross, looking for UFOs in our family of aliens, and the rosebush, iron welded gate, weed whackers, pushing lawnmowers over flinching finches, electric tidal capitalism crashed over us. When prisons close, we hope there are no museums for pain, Alcatraz, where tourists can safely visit nobody while prisoners are in solitary around this country. We made phone calls to our deaf friends, telling them to hurry to the hospital, that Ross holds the angles of angels. Have you heard the extreme loneliness of the pervert parade? Ross, we're here, baby. Everything will be all right, we wanted to say. But he was gone before we came with wet dreams of our cousins. Not you, primo, don't worry. Twerking in the library, tweaking in the laundromat, feeling nauseous and agnostic. What's good? Where's God? Beneath the vacancy sign. Where's our therapist? Maybe this is how we leave. The hospital, the poem, the cemetery has fine typography, the ones we love. Y'all. The fonts we need. Maybe we never breathed the cleanest air, visited Scandinavia, looked at auroras and their stretch marks, how Saturn lost her rings. Maybe the chore list was never meant to be completed. With Venus in retrograde, we tried not to drown while swimming backstrokes in rosé and roses with pit bulls named Rosie. Maybe one day we'll wake an oddity in the domestic and say, Ross, we're here. Where are you? Was that it? Was that life? We didn't do enough. We did so much. Thank you all.
So please do stick around. We have wine outside. We have books for sale in the bookstore. I'm sure some of the authors here would love to sign them. Check out the bookstore, check out the gallery, hang out, drink some wine. Thank you so much.